The Let Kashmir Decide movement is bringing to you a brand new show on JK TV where you will get the latest updates and analysis into the situation in Indian-occupied Kashmir.
Modi and the Indian government want the world to believe that all is well in Indian-occupied Kashmir, but that is decidedly not the case. Join us and different guests every Thursday for insight into the latest developments in the Kashmiri freedom struggle.
Good evening. Thank you for joining us here with Let Kashmir Decide and insights into Indian-occupied Kashmir. This week, Mary and I will be speaking with Shams Rehman about the legacy that is Maqbool Butt, the history and the impact that his life, the significance still has today. I'm a human rights activist, co-founder of Let Kashmir Decide, and a school teacher. And we usually look each week at insights into Indian-occupied Kashmir because the voices are unable to come out. So this week, we know that what they're doing in Srinagar, in the valley, is they're having a lockdown in memory of Maqbool Butt, and they're all, obviously it's harder for them to come out on the streets and protest. But the rest of in IIOJK, UK, internationally, lots of protests are being organised in honour of Maqbool Butt, and I think it's the largest I've seen in many years, which I'm really delighted about. So Mary and I'll introduce Mary, bring Mary in, and then we'll bring Shams in. So thank you. Good evening, Mary. Mary is in the USA. She is a political writer and a human rights activist. How are you this evening?
I'm very well, thank you.
That's good, and I'm pleased to hear that. And there's been quite a lot of demonstrations already going on this week, haven't there, with regards to Maqbool Butt in IIOJK, and they've then been sharing these out worldwide, and internationally we've been able to promote those out further and bring the voice out. So have you seen that? Have you sensed that yourself?
I actually didn't see those demonstrations. I look forward to them. I love the
okay. Yeah, well, to be fair, it took me a while to find them, and so next year, yeah, the links there need to be better. Right, so we'll bring in Shams Rehman. Good evening, Shams. Thank you for joining us.
Good evening, Mary and Claire.
Good evening.
Thank you. Shams is an independent researcher. He's a writer and a broadcaster living in the UK. Was there any more you'd like to add to that, Shams, or have I covered that, do you think?
No, yeah, that's fine. That's enough.
Yeah. That's brilliant. So I'll hand over to Mary, and Mary's going to have a talk with you, one about yourself and what brought you, what's involved you in this and your role in it, and then obviously we're discussing Maqbool Butt and the his life and the impact in that. So thank you very much.
Well, both Claire and I have been interviewed by you, Shams, so it's an honor to be able to interview you now. The first thing we would like to know is who you are, where you're from, where you grew up, and about your development and evolution as a political activist.
Okay, I'll try to be brief. Yeah, I am originally from a small village in Mirpur district, which is part of the Pakistani administered side of Jammu Kashmir. And that is one of the nearly 1,000 villages around that, where the most of the migration to Britain took place from early 19th century to today. So we have a huge diaspora in Britain, and almost about 70-80% of British Kashmiris from that region. So I was born in 1960s, early 60s, and grown up in 60s and 70s in that region where people were migrating one by one. And my schoolmates were, missing every few days. We learned that somebody such and such has gone to Britain. And and that was the time in 1967 when there was a big uprising in that region against the construction of Mangla Dam, which obviously submerged the whole city of Mirpur and many, about 300 villages around the Mirpur and all the fertile land. But interestingly, I was not aware of that. I was grown up and literally about 4 miles from Mirpur, old Mirpur city, and I didn't know about that. And when I went to Mirpur College, I didn't find out about anything. But that was the first time I heard the slogan of independent Kashmir. And for me, that was equal to saying that I'm not a Muslim. And that's how my initial year were shaped. That is my thought process was. That is what I believed in when I went to college. And then from there, I went to Karachi University. That was in 1982, I think. Yeah. And I joined Karachi University as a BA student of sociology in BA honors. And it was there on 11th of February 1984 that for the first time I went to a political demonstration, political protest. And I went, actually it started on 10th of February 1984. When in the hostel where I was living, Iqbal hostel, all the Kashmiri students particularly, and some other activists from Baloch, Pakhtun, Sindh, and Punjabi Pakistanis, they all got together and they were shouting slogans. And then somebody told me that we're going to protest outside of Indian embassy because Maqbool, Indian government has announced that they are going to hang Maqbool Butt tomorrow. And I was not I didn't have any interest, really significant interest in any form of politics. Although my mindset was very religious and very pro-Pakistani from Kashmiri point of view. And I saw religion and accession question, as same thing. And that was I was clear about because of my father's involvement in Jamaat Islami and his kind of upbringing. And also after that, I became quite kind of closed-minded. I didn't want to know anything else other than what I already thought I knew. So in that context, what I knew about Maqbool Butt at that time was that he was an Indian agent because he was not fighting for Pakistan. He was fighting for independence. So I was not interested to go, but my roommate, they said, look, everybody's going. So what you will do here, come and then afterwards we'll go in town for, we will have good evening. And I was all for that. So I said, okay, I'll go. So we went there outside of Indian embassy. And although by then I visited England once for about a month, I stayed there with my father and other family and friends. But I didn't know about anything about the abduction and killing of Indian diplomat, Mr. Ravindra Mhatre. I learned about that when we were outside of Indian embassy and leaders were making speeches, student leaders, and they were telling about Maqbool Butt, they were telling about the history of independence movement, and they were telling about what happened in England. So we were there for some time. Then afterwards, we went to the Karachi city and wandering around on restaurants and places. And then we came home, to our rooms. In the morning, I woke up and came out of my room thinking that I will get some money out from bank and I'll go to city, buy a train ticket, and then I'll go home because university was closed for indefinite period yet again. And I think it was to do with student union or something. So I thought I'll go home but when I went to the bank and I took money out, and I remember I think I took about 1,200 rupees out of my account. Then I start walking to my department because I wanted to see my friends and also see my roommates and ask them that let's go to the city. So, but when I was walking towards um, my department, I heard loud noises and shouts and sloganeering from my left side, which was a huge. It was not playground, but it was a huge field. You know, on the actually one side of university, and so I started walking there, and then it clicked for the first time in that morning. So I recalled the events of last night, and I thought, oh, probably they hanged Maqbool Butt. But then I started walking towards where the slogans were coming, and then I got there. It was confirmed that Maqbool Butt was hanged. I felt sad, but I didn't feel anything politically. I didn't feel any, really very strong sentiment at that time or strong emotion. So I saw roommates there, and I asked them. I was still focusing on what I was out to do. So I asked them that you want to come with me to train station, and they say, yeah, we're going to towards the Indian embassy, and we are just waiting for buses, and then after that we'll go to train station and we'll buy a ticket for you. So I said, yeah, that's fine. So I went with them. We went to the Indian airline office that was in the very beautiful, posh, glossy precinct in the Intercontinental Hotel. That was a 5-star hotel then. Now it's called Pearl Continental. And I think there were 3 university buses full of students, and in one bus there were about 50-60 students roughly. And they stopped there, and then students got out. They started shouting slogan, and they started pelting stones on the Indian airline office. So it was kind of into pieces within minutes, along with other shops around that. Then they came back. I was sitting there just, really scared what is going on. And they came back, and then the buses drove towards Indian embassy. When we got there, the one I can still remember, one black Mercedes stopped there when our buses were approaching the main gates. But they were quick. They before we reached there, they managed to run inside their building, and there was a huge lawn around the embassy building. So students came out and they threw stones, tried to hit the windows of the building, but I don't remember anyone reaching that far. And there were 2 police people. They couldn't do much. So they came back again in the bus and they said, let's go back to the airline. I was saying, why you want to go there back now? Just finish it. You have done that. They said, you shut up. So yeah, I said, okay. So went back there. And now there was the whole building was surrounded by a large number of police. And But they went there, buses were stopped, they came out again, they were shouting slogans and they were throwing stones. And police now obviously started beating them and using tear gas. One shell, fell in the bus I was sitting in. And this was the first time that I felt the tear gas. And when it hit my eyes, I was really shocked and I just ran out. And I went about 15, 20 yards away and stopped with the spectators. There were 15, 20 people standing on the footpath watching what was going on. So I went and stood there. I think I was there about a minute or two when I felt somebody, very strong, heavy grip on my neck. And I felt lifted up. And I couldn't see what was it or who was it. And within seconds, I started moving, hanging in the air. And then, instantly I jerked and I was freed. And I ran back to the where I was standing. And now I saw this huge man in civil clothes, not uniformed, coming towards me. And then this time he grabbed me from the front side and lifted it up again and walked towards the police pickup and hurled me into the pickup. And there were about, now I remember at that when I was dropped there, I didn't know how many police people were there. But I know that soon I was landed, they started beating me up, kicking me, and then swearing, and then saying, "You Kashmiris are, we feed you, and you want independent Kashmir." And I said, "I don't want that. And I am not part of these guys. I just came." And then they asked me, "You shout slogan, Kashmir will become Pakistan." And I did it because I believed in that at that stage. And I thought they won't beat me now. But the blow came after that was the biggest one. So I fell down on the floor. And then I felt a huge kick on my side. And I was still conscious, but I acted that I'm unconscious. And then this Sindhi policeman, because of his accent, I could recognize, he told them, "Why are you beating him? He will die. Take him to police station." And he said that in a very Sindhi accent. And I realized he did not beat me. But I was just, numbed on the floor of the pickup. And then I felt, hand went into my pocket, money went out. Then my watch, Seiko 5, my father sent me a few months ago, that was taken. Gold leaf cigarette pocket was taken.
Oh my God.
And I thought, yeah, you do anything, but don't hit me now. So then they took me to the police station. And in the police station, all these boys were there who were part of the protest. They all were there. They were shouting, they were singing, and they were saying Maqbool Butt name will be there till this world ends, and all those kind of slogans and poetry. And when I went in, my roommates looked at me. They said, "Where were you?" I said, "This is what happened to me." And they obviously gave me tips that what you should do and what you should not do when you go to protests. And but when on our way, after about 4 or 5 hours, we were released. And it's a long story, but I'm just telling you the main things. And when we were going back on a bus, private bus, it was about an hour of 50 minutes journey. All that time, I was feeling pain and aches and everything. But the questions which were really, really making me think, why did they do that to me? And why these people who are from Islamic groups, including my group Jamaat-e-Islami, why they were there protesting on the hanging of Maqbool Butt? Because it is from them I learned that he was an Indian agent. So these questions then started kind of challenging my existing understanding, and from then on, before this, whenever somebody come to my room, and they used to come after 11 because I had a kettle, electric kettle, which I took from England, and they used to come for tea after 11 when all the restaurants or the hotels were closed. So we had tea and everything, but soon they started talking politics. I used to tell them, please leave now. So I was not interested in talking about politics. But after that, then I started asking questions from pro-independence groups. Many of them now some people are in Switzerland, some are in Britain, some are there in high posts, some are retired. And so I started asking them. And then from that day till this day, it became part of my life. I wanted to know. It started with Maqbool Butt. And then there was not much actually to read about him at that time, apart from some stories by one of the activists. And then I obviously became aware of the wider issue of Kashmir, the independence politics, and then the progressive side of the world and progressive literature, which used to come from Russia then, but there was also some from West, and the local writers which were forbidden till then for me, because I was taught that such and such writers are anti-Islam writers, and they pollute your mind about sexual relationships and about society and about God and about everything. But then I started reading all of them, and so that is my journey, personal journey, and it started on 11th of February 1984, and that is why Maqbool Butt became part of my everything, basically, in terms of learning.
That was fascinating, by the way. Also, because it described sort of the state of of Kashmiri solidarity. Could you go now into who Maqbool Butt was, where he grew up, what kind of family he had, how he himself developed as a political person?
Okay, and before I tell about that, I would like to thank Khwaja Rafiq, who published Safir-e-Hurriyat, and later on Saeed Asad, who collated Maqbool Butt's letters from prison and compiled them into a book, Shaur-e-Farda, which means Vision of Tomorrow. These two, because these are the two books when I, particularly Safir-e-Hurriyat, when I was able to actually learn about the whole life story of Maqbool Butt and his struggle and his ideas. Before that, it was all rhetoric from different activists. So, Maqbool Butt was born in village Taregam, which is part of Kupwara, and I think the wider area is Baramulla. And his father was a peasant, farmer, small farmers like other villagers in Taregam, but he also was a tailor. He tailored clothes for extra money or as living one of the living profession or occupation. And he was about 11 when his mother died, and his father remarried after some years, and so he was grown up there till he was about 15, and this is his mother, Shamali Begum. second mother, and his father's second wife. And she's also campaigning these days for to bring him back from the prison where he's buried. And he went to local school, then uh, went to the college in Baramulla, and in 1958 he crossed over to the Pakistani administered Kashmir, where he married and studied in Peshawar University, and worked as a journalist, and then he joined the politics. But his political journey started when he was about 8 or 9 years old, and he writes about that in one of his letters, which he wrote from a Pakistani prison to the daughter of one of his colleagues who was also in prison with him, when she wrote him that, look, you guys are doing all this, giving sacrifice, you are in prison, but when I go school here, people say I am a daughter of a traitor and an Indian agent. And nobody actually supports you here. People are not really supporting you. They think you are agents. That kind of letter he received. And then he wrote her back and said, well, this is the situation we are in. Uh, you know, uh, slavery and occupation, it affects everybody, including children. And then he gave her an example that how, when he was 9 years old, he, in his village, one season, when the agent of feudal lord came in, Kardar, he was called Kardar, to collect their share from the produce of that year. But because the weather was not really suitable, so the produce at that time in that year was not really sufficient, or was less than normal. So they couldn't give him the normal share which they used to give him every year. And then when he told to the feudal lord that they're not giving enough, so he came and he said, well, I want my share, I don't know where you get it from. But then they didn't have it. So then Kardar told some of the village farmers that if this feudal lord, if feudalist, if he's gone, then you have to give me whatever he says. If you want any discount or concession, make sure that you get it now when he is here. So they pleaded him, the feudal lord, that please, we don't have enough to give it to you. But he was insistent that no, there is no, it's not negotiable. So when he sat in his car, uh, some villager elders, they told the children to lie in front of his car. So children did that, and then their parents, they told the feudal that if you can't give us discount, then you might as well go over them, because we won't have anything to feed them. So then he agreed that, okay, give it whatever you can. And Maqbool Butt was one of those children who were lying in front of the car. And he himself described that event to Azra Mir, who was daughter of Mr. G.M. Mir, his colleague in the prison. And then his second political activity, which we can describe as political activity, was in the school. And now he was, I think it might be 49 or 50, and Maharaja rule was over. And Kashmir was now governed by Sheikh Abdullah, the National Conference Party, and who made some very significant reforms in terms of land distribution and education and health, but the class behavior was still kind of a routine in some places. And in that school, it was a norm that on every year on reward ceremony or other parents events, the parents of the affluent children will sit on one side and the poor on the other side. And in one of the years when Maqbool Butt was also a achiever, he was to receive award, uh, but he refused to do that unless this seating arrangement was changed. And from that year, which from his family, this story comes from his family, that after that this arrangement was changed, and now anybody could sit anywhere. So this was he like. And when in college, he was also a very active student in education as well as in politics. And when Sheikh Abdullah was arrested in 1958, 57, I think, but around those years, but then he was very active student in college and very tilted towards plebiscite front. And he had to go underground when Sheikh Abdullah was arrested again, and the crackdown was made on activists of plebiscite front and all those people who supported him. And he went underground. And now there are two accounts. One account is that he went underground and then he came over. But recently I have read some material from local writers who gave very strong evidence that before joining college, Maqbool Butt was quite engaged in the Jamaat Islami politics in terms of teaching religion and religious books and the Quran and all that. And others say that when he went underground, for those 3-4 months, he taught in a Jamaat Islami school. But obviously, that is something which is still being explored. But he did cross over in 1958, and before that he tried 4 times when he was in school to cross over, actually, according to some of his colleagues who tried with him, but they were caught by the border police and sent back to their homes. But now when he was over, he was then arrested here in Muzaffarabad. He was kept in Muzaffarabad fort, and then was a police station for the first time. And he was released only with his uncle Aziz and some others. They were released only after some local people from other side of Kashmir who were settled there. They kind of recommended that we know them, they are okay. So then they were released. Then his uncle took him to Lahore, for him to get admission in Punjab University. But obviously they failed. They couldn't get admission there. Then through some contacts, they went to Peshawar, and there he got admission to study Urdu literature in Peshawar University. And till then, it seems that he was very much politically, he was very much in the framework of the pro-Pakistani politics, which most Kashmiris in the Kashmir Valley who came over, they told us that they had very different perception of Pakistan, and they saw the Pakistan is better alternative than India. So they and particularly because it's the same religion. So they were expecting that they will get all the support from Pakistani side, from Pakistani state, from Pakistani government to liberate the other side of Kashmir. And he practically offered his services to the Pakistani army in 1965, April 1965, around that time, when the Pakistani agencies were sending people to other side in the name of, I think it was called Operation Gibraltar. And when Maqbool Butt offered that, I can go on other side, I know the area, I know the language, I can do a lot of work there. But they did not recruit him, or they didn't accept his services. And that kind of made, disappointed. He became disappointed that they are doing this operation which does not make any sense, and they're not involving local people. So after that, he joined plebiscite front in Pakistani side of Kashmir. And in 1965, this was formally kind of announced, and different pro-independence groups were merged into it. There were some groups who functioning in Pakistan of the Kashmiri diaspora from Jammu and the Valley, and then there were other groups within what is commonly called Azad Kashmir, the Pakistani administered Kashmir. Particularly in Mirpur, there were, few dozen activist people in Mirpur since the 1950s. So they all came together under the umbrella of plebiscite front. And Maqbool Butt was elected as founding publicity secretary, Amanullah Khan general secretary, and Abdul Khalik Ansari from Mirpur president. And it was around that time then when there were debates were held within plebiscite front that there should be more than just peaceful, political public meetings and processions and newspaper statements about independence of Kashmir, or plebiscite or referendum in Kashmir, or self-determination in Kashmir. We need to do something more, otherwise nobody is going to listen to us. But within plebiscite front, after these debates, there was a resolution moved by Maqbool Butt and Amanullah Khan that there should be a militant wing, armed wing of plebiscite front. We should form an armed wing, because that was the time when at the global level, national liberation was accepted as the legitimate path for any a nation or country or state that was occupied by any foreign armies. So initially, it obviously originated in the colonial context, but then in neo-colonial structures, it was also accepted. Even UN accepted the right of people, to fight their liberation through any means. So this was the world where it was being considered and discussed within plebiscite front. And at the same time, Algerian struggle, the Palestinian struggle, the Vietnam, and the name of Ben Bella and Ho Chi Minh and Che Guevara and Yasser Arafat and all those others, they were also in the air everywhere. So this and the Irish struggle. So these were the kind of inspirational movements for places like Kashmir, and for people who were aware of these. Obviously, a vast majority was not aware of these struggles, but these people who were active, and it was very much into in the anti-imperialist context. It was very clearly against the imperialism and exploitation and all that. So this concept of freedom they wanted to achieve through national liberation struggle was not very popular within plebiscite front. But when they failed to win votes within the organization, they then thought that it is fine to form a national liberation front outside of plebiscite front. So they did that on 13th of August 1966 in Peshawar at the house of Major Amanullah Khan, who was ex-Indian National Army guy who fought against British in the army of Subhash Chandra Bose. So these few small group then formed this NLF, and then in 1968, Maqbool Butt, along with three of his colleagues, went on other side, and their purpose was to organize, resistance cells in villages and in places, in cities and everywhere. And for 3 months, they did that. And then after 3 months, when they were spotted, or they were informed about by some people too, the intelligence services of India. The place they were staying, that was raided, and in the encounter, one of their colleague, Aurangzeb, who was from Gilgit Baltistan, and he was killed, and one of the Indian intelligence services inspector, Amar Chand or something was his name. So these were the two casualties, and then they were arrested, and they were given death sentence in the court in Srinagar, in the court of I think it was Neelkant Ganju, and that was the name of the judge. And in there, it is very famously quoted everywhere. And I have not read any court statement in that court by myself, but I have read different references, different places. He said that because he was described as enemy agent, and he told the judge that I have no objection in accepting, but you have to make a little amendment. I am not an enemy agent. If you're looking at me from Indian lenses, I am not an enemy agent. I am the enemy of Indian occupation in my country. So, but he was given death sentence, and they were kept in local prison. But I think within 3-4 months, they managed to escape through a tunnel, about 38-meter tunnel, 38-foot, tunnel. And they, after walking through jungles and through snow for about 2 weeks, they managed to cross back to Azad Kashmir, or Pakistani administered Kashmir. Here they were arrested, interrogated, tortured in Muzaffarabad, and then they were released when the protests were growing, organized by National Student Federation, National Liberation Front, and even Plebiscite Front. So then they were released. And then the next phase was very significant phase, was the hijacking of Ganga, which was done in 71. And which was seen initially as a very heroic action. And because it was not for the first time that they did it, they did the first time in Asia, but it was happening in other places, particularly Palestinian guerrillas were doing that. So it was seen as like a something big, and it was for the first time that the young generation in Azad Kashmir became aware of these people. And but obviously, Pakistani government and their installed people in Muzaffarabad, the Azad Kashmiri government, they were not happy. And when um, India stopped the flights from West Pakistan to East Pakistan after the hijacking, then the Maqbool Butt and his comrades were tried for hijacking, doing the hijacking for India. They thought this was an Indian conspiracy, and then again they were tried as enemy agents. And in that Pakistani court, he also said the same thing, that I'm not part of any conspiracy. And we can talk about that later, maybe, about when are we talking about his ideas and what was the conflict with Pakistan state. And they were tried after, I think, about 2-3 years trial, where thousands and thousands of witnesses were appeared. They were they were not found guilty of any crime apart from, I think, keeping armed without license or something. And apart from one, Hashim Qureshi, who was given 14 years, but then after, I think, few years, he was also released when the appeal was made. So this was something which was, I think, rise and sudden fall of National Liberation Front, because after that, National Liberation Front was dismantled. Yeah, I know I can talk about, for hours.
It's very interesting. It's very interesting.
If you have any specific question, I'll welcome that.
Yes, I'm really glad that you put his approach to guerrilla warfare in the context of the times, because many people try to discredit him or impugn him on the basis of his support for guerrilla warfare, which was by then all over African anti-colonial struggles, the Palestinians, many struggles. So it was part of the times. I was really appreciated your take on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's common. It's common that he, not only by Indian and Pakistani state, but sometimes his followers, they present him as a guerrilla leader who didn't have any politics.
Yes.
Or are they now aware of his politics? Whereas he was very, very clear. He said, we have to be political soldiers. So political soldier, and he elaborated on that. That means that we have to understand the politics of our freedom struggle. And then if somebody uses force against us, then we should be able to use in our self-defense, not the actions against any unarmed people or civilian population or anything. So he was actually very clear, like most of the national liberation struggle at that time were.
Could you talk about his somewhat complicated relationship with Pakistan? Like you said, they arrested him, prosecuted him, tortured him. But I remember seeing in one of his letters that he distinguished between the corrupt leadership of Pakistan and the Pakistani people who supported the Kashmiri independence struggle. So could you go into his relationship with Pakistan? It's quite complex, actually.
I think like I said, when he came over, he was very, hopeful. He was expecting that any activity for the freedom of Kashmir will be supported by Pakistan unconditionally. And but obviously, after his own personal experiences in 1965, he changed his approach or his understanding of Pakistan. And now because he was living inside Pakistan since 59, 58, and he was studying at Peshawar University, where his colleagues included Ahmad Faraz, who was a huge progressive poet of Pakistan, and some other activists, Pashtun activists, very progressive activists. So obviously, they had different experiences of Pakistan. They knew that there is an establishment and there are people. So then he was for the people. He was on the side of people, Maqbool Butt, and he spelt it out in his court statement, which I recommend everybody should read, which he submitted to Lahore court after Ganga hijacking. And in there, he starts with this because he was accused of a conspiracy. He charged with a conspiracy against Pakistan. He said, I never hatched any conspiracy, nor I was part of any conspiracy. I have rebelled against, my crime is that I have rebelled against slavery, occupation, exploitation, ignorance, diseases and deprivation. And our clash with the Pakistani establishment started the day we formed our organization to liberate our country by ourselves. This was not acceptable to the Pakistani generals and the Pakistani establishment. They wanted us to be their stooge. And we refused to do that, because for us, liberation is not just Kashmiri people's liberation, is the liberation of Pakistani people and the Indian people. So this was his understanding, and on that basis, he viewed his relationship, or the relationship of Kashmiri liberation struggle, with Indian and Pakistani rulers, because he was very clear that this struggle is not merely to end the occupation, although that is the primary goal, but the struggle is to liberate people from all other chains and illnesses. So, and he was very clear that Pakistani rulers, they had a conspiracy to crush the Bangladeshi people's legitimate struggle and deny them their democratic right, which the Awami Party, they won the election, and Pakistani established, instead of transferring power to them, they used force to silence them. And to hide their own crimes, they're using Ganga hijacking, that this was some part of conspiracy. So yeah, I mean, this is how he elaborated that.
Quite
Is
interesting.
is it clear? Or is it...
Yes, very interesting.
Okay.
I'm learning a lot. He was a founder of the Jammu Kashmir Liberation Front. Can you describe the basic politics of the JKLF? If you could elaborate what they were as he founded and how they are now, because it's still an extremely active organization all over the world.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, JKLF was formed in Britain, in Birmingham, in 1977. By then, Maqbool Butt was gone back to Indian side of Kashmir, and he was taken into Delhi Tihar prison. Maqbool Butt was founder of National Liberation Front, Jammu Kashmir National Liberation Front, that was formed on 13th of August 1966 in Peshawar, along with Amanullah Khan, along with some other colleagues. So in 76, after Ganga, when the National Liberation Front was dismantled and people were kind of gone quiet or went out of country, Then um, I think people in Britain who belonged to Plebiscite Front, who was from Mirpur, and they migrated to Britain long time ago, and here there was large numbers in Birmingham. They invited Maqbool Butt, Amanullah Khan, and GM Mir and Khalid Ansari to come to Britain and work here, and because their situation is very tough now. So Abdul Khalik Ansari, he used to come and go. This was his family, so he didn't have any visa issues. Amanullah Khan was given visa, but GM Mir didn't get visa, so he couldn't come over. Amanullah and Abdul Khalik Ansari came over, but Maqbool Butt didn't want to come to England. He said, I am not going to go anywhere. I will stay here. So when these guys came over to Britain, he was really, it is, people say that he was disappointed that things are not working here in Azad Kashmir. So he went back to Indian side of Kashmir. And he said, I will do whatever I can, I will do it there. So he went back, try to kind of reactivate the cells he created few years back in 60, 68, 69. But obviously, after that, when they were captured, the situation was changed there as well. And then Amanullah Khan and Abdul Khalik Ansari and local British activists at that time, they formed Jammu Kashmir Liberation Front in Birmingham. So Maqbool had no direct kind of organizational link with Jammu Kashmir Liberation Front.
Oh.
But he was obviously their leader, and he was leader of every organization by then.
That's really interesting. Thank you. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
It's hard to get some of this information.
Yeah. It is generally now kind of presented everywhere that he was founder of JKLF, but he was definitely founder of National Liberation Front, but not Jammu Kashmir Liberation
Front. Could you talk about why he had been in jail for several years in 1984? I think he had 2 death sentences that he was under. Can you explain why India chose February 11th, 1984 to hang him? And part of that question is why they refused to return his body to Kashmir.
Yeah. Well, there are a number of versions or sides to this, the why. But one thing is very clear that there were different attempts made by his organization or his colleagues or his different people for his release since 1976, when he was taken to Indian prison, but nothing worked. And here in Britain in February 1984, some people kidnapped or abducted Ravinder Matre while he was coming from his office. He was coming home by bus, and they kind of picked him up and took him to some place in Birmingham. And then they, through Reuters agency, I think, they said that we have your man, we have kidnapped this person, and now India, if they release Maqbool Butt and give 1 million in ransom or whatever you want to call it, and then after 2 days, or 3 days, maybe 3 days, well, he was kidnapped on 2nd, and then he was killed on 5th. Yeah, 5th of February. His dead body was found in the fields. And now this is what happened. Now there are so many sides to it, that why it happened this way, why it happened this way. But the critic say that this was no organization will do that. No, any sane person or any people with little political understanding will say that, okay, we kidnap you one day, and after 2 days, if you don't respond, we'll kill it. You give time, because this is, somebody's life at stake, not only the one you have kidnapped, but one you want to release. So you want to have it released. So this is the critics' view, that this was a very amateur and emotional, sentimental. This is the soft criticism. The hard criticism is that this was done with the intention, or that in mind, that when this will happen, India will hang Maqbool Butt. So there are within movement, there are issues. Yeah, and if you look at things closely, what was happening in Tihar and about the case of Maqbool Butt, unfortunately, the least can be said about this incident is that it was very immature and very emotional and very short-sighted action, because his case was his lawyers appealed against the decision, because they found certain flaws in the case, and they were hopeful that it will be reopened, and probably his death sentence at least will be downgraded to life sentence or whatever. So they were very strong. From his lawyers, there are evidence that it was happening. But when this happened, then the Indian government acted in revenge. So they avenged it. They threw aside all the legal procedures, and even if the latest book by is called Black Warrant, and it's confessions of an Indian Tihar prison jailer, Sunil Gupta something, and he there is a detailed piece about Maqbool Butt, and he very clearly says that Indian government did not follow the normal legal procedures, and he was hanged, perhaps for something he had nothing to do with.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's how this happened, and it is very sad chapter of independence struggle. I see it like that. Well, obviously, there are other people who say that no, it was 2 days were enough for India to respond.
Shams, it could have been misguided activists, and I am not a conspiratorial thinker, but it also could have the influence of undercover agents.
There are so many possibilities.
Yes, there's many
possibilities.
Yes, because it's clearly an unwise thing to do, to kill a hostage like that.
Yeah.
Could you go into? There are many attempts, even by I'm not sure what they're motivated by, to discredit, to impugn his legacy, to deny that he had any influence in Kashmir, any followers in Kashmir, and that he was just a reckless guerrilla operative. Could you go into what you think is behind those attempts to discredit him? Because I think it's very clear that he is of the political stature of Malcolm X, Nelson Mandela, and that Stephen Biko, and that kind of political person. So could you go into some of the reasons why you think they're trying to impugn his reputation?
Yeah, I think this is very important question, and it can be understood in the context of the political transformation or political change after the division of Kashmir in 1947. In 1947, when Kashmir was divided, there's a long story how it happened, but I'm not going into that. But when it was eventually divided, one part came under the Indian control, another came under the Pakistani control. The government which was installed under the Pakistani control was of Muslim Conference, which was very much pro-Pakistani anyway. And the government which was installed on the Indian side was of National Conference, which was very close to Indian National Congress. So this was kind of perfect division. If we look at neutrally through, objective situation, it appeared it was perfect division. Politically, at least, not culturally and family ties and all that. It was horrific. It was brutal. But in terms of politics, it was perfect division. Those people on this side, they were pro-Pakistani. On that side, they were mainly pro-Indian. The biggest national Kashmiri Party National Conference, they went to join India, or they supported Maharaja's accession to India. So there was no resistance, real resistance against the accession to India or the Muslim conferences, supporting accession to Pakistan. There was no. The independence voices were very small, because the biggest independence voice was the Muslim Conference and National Conference before division. They both wanted independence. But when this became a military conflict, they were marginalized, sidelined, and then one went for Pakistan and went for India. So it was in 1953 when Indian government of Nehru, who was very close friend of Sheikh Abdullah, the head of Kashmir National Conference, and now he was prime minister, he was deposed and arrested under the kind of accusations that he was working with the Americans for independent Kashmir. So they dismissed him and arrested him. And that is when his political party, National Conference, their cadre and the rest of the leadership, they then created plebiscite front. That Kashmir, the final decision of Kashmir is yet to be made, and we want plebiscite. We want referendum. We don't, accept accession. And that is when the anti-India or pro-Kashmir, the resistance politics was reinitiated. And on the Pakistani side, exactly same thing happened. The prime minister, the president, which Pakistanis themselves installed few years back, Sardar Ibrahim Khan of Muslim Conference, he was removed from power, like they did to Sheikh Abdullah. And when they removed him, the same Punchi people who only 5-6 years back fought against Maharaja forces, Maharaja, the Kashmiri autocrat or monarchic ruler, now they were fighting against the Pakistani constabulary, because they rose in revolt. Why you removed our president? So there was a lot of atrocities. Usually there is not much written about the second Punch rebellion. The first Punch rebellion was against Maharaja. The second Punch rebellion was against the Pakistani atrocities. But some people did write, but it's not very popular reading or information. And so this is, and in Mirpur, they constructed Mangla Dam, which submerged the whole city, and there was a movement against that in Mirpur. And for the first time, this idea of independence actually spread out of the city. Before it was just in some pockets of the city of Mirpur. But after that, it gradually caught the attention of other, mainly student and educated people from other bradaris, because that region was very much kind of structured around bradaris, the castes or the tribes. But this was new politics around a bigger idea than your own tribe. So, and inside Pakistan, then there were groups like I mentioned earlier, the diaspora from Jammu and Valley and Gilgit. They were there. They were connected as well. So these all on this side connected into plebiscite front, and on that side it was also plebiscite front. But then Jamaat-e-Islami, which was pro-Pakistani group but very small in 1947. Like on this side, the pro-independence were very small. But gradually, because of these events, they gradually became the new form of politics. The old form, which was represented by National Conference on the Indian side and Muslim Conference on Pakistani side, they were gradually made seen as sold out. So the new generation saw that our future is independence or self-determination. And but those who obviously were more integrated in the ruling structure of India and Pakistan, they were comfortable, and for them these new voices were not welcome at all. So they were used by Indian and Pakistani establishment to give this impression that nobody wants independence. Pakistani would say everybody wants to go to Pakistan, and Indian would say, yeah, there are some people who come from Pakistani side, otherwise every Kashmiri is happy with India. So it was their own actions by the Indian and Pakistani governments which actually gave birth to this new movement. And this gradually, it was grown despite all the oppression, suppression, propaganda, and huge state machineries distorting what is happening and maligning people who were speaking for independence. So this gradually then actually became bigger and bigger. And yes, when Maqbool was hanged, there was no big reaction on the Indian side. There was no huge reaction. There was reaction in his village, around that area, in the city, by some very educated people or some political leader like, what's his name, GM Lone or something. Abdul Ghani Lone, sorry. Abdul Ghani Lone. He was quite a credible leader, but not the big ones. And the National Conference cadre was sad, but they didn't come out because the stakes were a bit higher for the party and for the families and for everybody. But on the Pakistani side, the reaction was huge.
Really? Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, because he worked here most of his life. So the younger people who came out in thousands and did whatever they could do. And like I said, I was in Karachi, and there was a huge reaction. And in London, by then, it was seen as the biggest protest by British Kashmiris at Hyde Park. By then, it was biggest. Since then, there are more bigger happened, but then it was the biggest. So this huge reaction on this side was very concerning, alarming for the Pakistani intelligence and establishment. And so they were happy to support Kashmiris to go on Indian side and fight against Indian occupation. So they did their best that they should fight against Indian occupation and leave us alone. and I think they were quite successful. but because now it's open secret, the Pakistani intelligence chief Asad Durrani clearly, very detailedly wrote in his book that initially they supported the pro-independence JKLF, but then in '92 they dumped them and they adopted the Islamist Hizbul Mujahideen. And he says that this was our mistake, but it happened.
So interesting. Could you tell us what you think his legacy is now? How Kashmiris in Indian occupied Kashmir and also in Azad and Pakistan, how they see him as a figure, as an inspirational figure. What is his legacy now?
I think Maqbool Butt's legacy, one is the defiance that no, we're not accepting occupation. Second is that his, you know, this political identity, away and different from Indian and Pakistani nationalisms. Indian and Pakistani state continuously try to Indianize Kashmir and Pakistanize Kashmir on their respective sides. And before this struggle, which started in '60s and gradually grown, it was commonly perceived and accepted. On this side, we are Pakistani. On that side, they are Indian. But it's in last 5-6 decades that more majority people now clearly see themselves as Kashmiri rather than Indian and Pakistani. Although there are debates and contestation within this Kashmiri narrative, and it has limitations as well and some exclusions as well, like Indian and Pakistani nationalism have exclusions. But it is for the, you know, for now it is the most popular narrative. There is India, there is Pakistan, and here is Kashmir, and we are Kashmiris. So this identity, I think he played a very central role in construction this political identity, and also I think his legacy. One aspect which is also usually ignored by most commentators and analysts on Kashmir is that primarily Kashmiri struggle from very first day in 1930 was for democracy, for democratic representation of people. The demand of that struggle was responsible government, and by responsible government they meant the government elected by the people. And this process was actually gradually evolving when Pakistani tribals invaded Kashmir. And people were winning inside Kashmir. The people, were winning by voting. It was not like that it was autocratic rule. It was family-oriented, family-centered rule like all monarchies are. But people were gradually increasing the space for themselves, and Maharaja had no kind of option now but to agree with a monarchic or constitutional monarchy, or however they described at that time. But when the Indian and Pakistani entered, the first casualty was democracy, because from then on they made it illegal for anybody to politically campaign for independent Kashmir. You could participate in elections and everywhere only if you take oath that you will be loyal to the Indian constitution and Indian state. are the Pakistani constitution and Pakistani state. Anybody who wanted a Kashmir for Kashmiris was, you know, not allowed to participate in any democratic, not only in democratic process, but in the public service. So to employment, even you want, if you join as a teacher in Pakistani side of Kashmir, where people think that it's very free, even if you join as a teacher, you have to sign this oath that I will be loyal to the accession to Pakistan ideology. And same is on the other side. So this process, which was hijacked, Maqbool Butt, although he is presented as, like we said, guerrilla leader and a fighter, but his political vision was not confined to these arenas. He very clearly, he did try to be part of the whatever democratic space was there when he was in Peshawar. And also in 1975, he contested elections against the People's Party candidate, but he was made to lose, by a lot of forces, and details are available on that. But in his last interview, which was given to Kam Chadda, an Indian journalist in the Indian prison of Tihar, when he asked that, what are your political beliefs in terms of system, and he very clearly said that the best way to govern a society is a real representative democracy, a real representative of people, which is elected through institutions which are created by the people. And that is what the goal of our struggle is. That we want a genuinely democratic society where people are represented through institutions which are created by the people. And that was his vision for tomorrow.
I'm seeing on the comments that people are making that they, I don't think you did, but that you're making a distinction between free Kashmiris and Azad and Kashmiris under occupation in India. Do you think in the long run, the vision is that they will be united once again as they were before 1947? And of course,
sorry.
No, I'm finished.
Yeah, I mean, that was the destination or goal of independence struggle when it was rekindled, like I said, on both sides, particularly on this side, on the Pakistani side. And I think that remains the goal of most of the pro-independence activism. However, there are differences now, and there are alternative visions. One of them is the Kashmir Valley should become independent on its own. Other is that that this the state people as a whole cannot make decision on independence, because there are pockets where there is no support at all for independence, or there is very clear support for Indian to go with India, and then there are pockets where are clear support to go for Pakistan. So this referendum perhaps will not solve the problem. Therefore, there should be regional referendums, and there should be referendum in Gilgit-Baltistan, in IIOJK. There are 5 administrative units. Each should have a referendum, what they want. So, but the pro-independence politics and struggle and idea is for the whole state to reunite, and there should be a inclusive democratic government, And obviously within that, then there is a spectrum: how inclusive, how democratic, how Muslim, how less Muslim, how secular, how Kashmiri. So there are diversity, unfortunately, like in any society,
Yes,
there
of
is
course.
diversity. But overall goal is that there should be a democratic solution. People should decide what they want.
This was so interesting, Shams. Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
thank you, Shams. Yeah,
You're welcome.
it really was. And I mean, obviously, our next question and where we move on to, as you say, Let Kashmir Decide. One of Mary and I's drives, and I know that you're there with us as well, is to make the world, the international community, aware of this crisis. For us, we feel that it's just not recognized enough, that the attention is just not out there. We think the political divides amongst people making it just a political issue have helped exacerbate the problem. And I think, you know, it's that campaigning to look about if we can raise the awareness first and bring everybody to it, and then the working, you know, that unity, that strength, that look at Kashmir, and then can come, you know, the ideologies and the arguing, you know. Just myself today, and it happens constantly, but because it's in my head, you know, I get accused of I'm either with India and I never say anything bad about Pakistan, or I'm with Pakistan and I only want, you know, for them to go with Pakistan. I'm stuck in the middle because people don't seem to understand it's about raising all voices or using the campaign for where there's going to get most attention. You know, Indian occupied Kashmir, they don't have the voices. And we can see that really well, I think, with the Maqbool Butt demonstrations, etc. Azad are just flying high, you know, the colour and everything, and they're demonstrating. We're able to do that in London as well. In Srinagar, in the valley, it's a lockdown day. You know, they can't come out. It's in there. Their voices are very quiet. So I think we often speak for Indian occupied Kashmir because they can't speak. And so we just get stuck in the middle. But drawing to that, obviously, we've got a big protest in London tomorrow, which JKLF are pushing. But I also see that Tariq are also joining, which is I'm delighted for, because that unity, they're getting behind Maqbool Butt as, you know, his message. And so, you know, anything, the bigger we can make it, the better. Sadly, I won't be able to make it myself, but I shall be there in person. So I wanted to just have it here, the van they have
Hopefully,
going
we
around
will be
London
able
today.
to.
If I
Hopefully, it will be streamed on Facebook and including JKTV and everywhere.
Yes.
Brilliant, because I think you're live with it, aren't you, tomorrow, Shams? So we can tune into that, and which is excellent. And like I say, we're seeing it come out from Azad this week, and they're culminating in their big day tomorrow. So we'll have a look at the JKLF van that's going around London.
Yeah, that's
So
interesting.
pressing play. Yeah, short clip here. Very stationary clip. There's one where they've got some cracking shots of it going past Big Ben and the London Eye in the background. I've got some of those pictures here, but my buttons on the computer aren't playing very well tonight, so I'll stay safe and leave it there. So 1 o'clock outside the Indian High Commission tomorrow for London. I believe there's also one in Birmingham for anybody that cannot get to London. So solutions going forward, Shams, bearing in mind the legacy of Maqbool Butt tomorrow and going forward, what do you think we should do here in the UK? What should we do internationally? Where does this movement need to go for a resolution?
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge question, and there is a whole kind of journey of solutions as well since 1947, when the issue was taken to United Nations, and the solution offered by United Nations was that both India and Pakistan withdraw their armies, and then people of Kashmir decide what they want to do with their future. And now there is, because none of the armies were withdrawn, and the governments on both sides did not kind of follow through what they agreed at United Nations. And now there are debates. I mean, obviously, so 75 years are gone, and so much is changed inside Kashmir and India and Pakistan and in the wider region. So now there are a lot of debates that what is actually offered in the UN resolutions. Is there a third option or is not? But the template, the wider template which provided by UN, I think still relevant. And after that, India and Pakistan also signed Shimla Agreement, which says that they will negotiate these issues between them, including Kashmir. So, but on the ground inside Kashmir, situation is changed. Like I said, in 1947, there were not many people who would fight for independence, but now situation is different. And now it's not, and now it's in Gilgit Baltistan and in Jammu and Ladakh. This idea of Kashmiriness, which is very popular in Valley and Azad Kashmir, that is challenged because they say we are not part of it. We have been excluded from this. So there is a demand that there should be internal dialogue, intra regions, and they should come up with some common understanding or common grounds on what they should be kind of presenting to the India and Pakistan and the world. But obviously that dialogue is not possible without facilitation of India and Pakistan, because it's, they control the regions. And in every region where people challenge their control, they bring about the anti-terror laws. Although on Indian side, the situation is far, far more worse. But on Pakistani side, it's not as simple that anybody who challenges their writ, they are, in Gilgit-Baltistan is called Schedule 4. And that is exactly like anti-terror law. So these regions needs to be kind of given space and opportunity to have their own internal discussion and dialogue, and come up with what is possible, what they want. Then they can ask for support from countries and peoples around the world. And the world can support. If they support, then they can negotiate that with India and Pakistan, and maybe come up with something which is good for Indian people, good for Pakistani people, and good for Kashmiri people. But then probably there are a lot of apologies overdue from all sides, because it's I can theoretically I can give 101 solutions, but if you look at the real situation on the ground, then it has to be led by people in there. And there are, people in there are in conversation, thanks to social media and WhatsApp groups, and people from different regions for the first time talking to each other.
Yeah.
Historically, they were not allowed to talk to each other, but now they are talking to each other. So I hope that some kind of Kashmir or state-centric, I should say, a solution will gradually emerge. And I hope the Indian and Pakistani rulers will understand that the forced solutions never worked.
Yes.
Anywhere, not only in Kashmir, but the forced solutions are now working within Indian and Pakistani confederations. There are voices within those two countries who are challenging this imposition from center. And so it's the whole South Asian situation. I think they hopefully something, I know the situation is such that people will be thinking, what hope? They're not even listening. What are you talking about? But I think they can't keep this going for long. 900,000 troops
Yeah.
in one small region. They can't govern it like that. And on the other side as well, people are obviously not as vocal, and they don't clash with the Pakistani army. But they don't like them either. They say, if you are not here to protect people, then leave. So
As
there
you
are
say, Shams, yeah, it's very complex. But then sometimes when we wrap it all up, the solution is actually also very simple in terms of, the Let Kashmir Decide and lead that forward. I
Yes.
mean, we all have our different, and
Yeah.
we're all doing our different roles. And I think here for us at Let Kashmir Decide, it's the raising of awareness, because we may reach more people that hold a key or that, and then we're here. It's like that army on the outside when Kashmiris, they find their way through to the solution. We're here. And obviously just now we're looking for endorsements of our human rights mandate, where we've looked at the commonalities, the things that unite us, because it's a human rights issue
Yeah.
that we use the narrative of. We come to it from that side, to recognize that it is a land dispute. But because of that, the human rights are there, and it's a human right to, as Indigenous people, to have a right to your land. Our human rights are enshrined within the United Nations articles and the treaty, and that was set up after the war
Yeah.
for us to ensure it didn't happen again. And I
In,
think
in
what's
terms
really
of
sad,
in terms of a kind of inclusive agenda or wider agenda, with I think almost all Kashmiris and even the Indians and Pakistani who care for justice and human rights, they all can come together, is given by United Nations in their two reports by the Human Rights Commission in 2019 and 20, or was it 2018 and 19? Two human rights reports on both sides of Kashmir, and they listed the problems, and they made those demands to the Indian and Pakistani governments to work on these issues and make situation better. And if all Kashmiri organizations actually adopt that as their charter of demand, that covers the whole state and all the issues in the state. And they can add some local if they're not. But that provides a good basis for coming together of all the voices. But obviously, only the people who are leading these organizations and their activists, only they can do it. We can only suggest.
Yeah.
yeah, that's right. No, well said. And that's probably a good note for us to leave it on. Shams, is there anything else that you would like to say that you haven't managed to say that you would like to air before we do finish up?
Well, I would suggest that people must read the. Unfortunately, I should have sent you the links of these things, but we can share it here later. Uh, the statement of Maqbool Butt in the Pakistani court after Ganga hijacking, and his letters and interviews, which are translated in English as well, and I will send you the links here. And I think everybody should read that before making up their mind that what was he like, because he is misrepresented, misread, and as usual, there is a lot of emotional, attachment, and but less understanding, and he needs to be understood more, because that
Yeah,
gives our struggle
no,
the widest possible voice.
absolutely. And I like the way, Shams, that you started off there where you had your one ideology. And then because you opened your eyes and you researched and you learned, you formed your own opinion. But what you also have is an awareness of people that do support the one ideology and why they support it. And so a tolerance and an understanding. And it's like myself, I also, you know, gone through the majority of my life without knowing anything about Kashmir. So it's having that tolerance and understanding for people that don't stand up or speak up because they don't know any better. But at the same time, we have that awareness and the tools to know to try and reach people. So I think very much within this struggle, you know, the narrative, so much false narrative that we're seeing come from India or other people, you know, it's really important that we do make up our own mind within that. So that's a good message. Thank you very much. So the culmination of Maqbool Day is tomorrow. Yeah, so looking forward to seeing everything that's happening. Good luck, Shams, with your program tomorrow.
Thank you.
And yeah, thank you. And we look forward to hearing all the kind of the voices that are coming out from Jammu and Kashmir or not, and how quiet that Srinagar is. So thank you very much for joining us, both of you. And we'll see you again soon. And yeah, Shams, if you could send us those links, that would be great. So thank you very much. Mary, thank you so much to you across the pond.
Thank you, Shams.
Thank you.
And yeah, good night, Shams. Thank you for joining us.